All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Marina Delajanis, and I serve as the Deputy Water Resources Director for the Lake County Watershed Protection District. And we are excited to enjoy Groundwater Awareness Week with you all and touch base on our Big Valley Groundwater Basin public meeting. So we had a public meeting yesterday, has the same information that we are going to share with you today, just at a different time. So I'm going to go ahead and start off and just do quick introductions. I will pass it off to Director Scott DeLeon and the Lake County Water Resources team, and then we'll hand it over to Stantec Consulting Services for introduction. So take it away, Scott.
Okay, thanks. I can't see myself on my screen, so hopefully it's working. Huh?
Yes.
Okay. Happy to be here. Thanks for joining, and should be an interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Go ahead, William.
Hello, everybody. My name is William Fox. I'm a Water Resource Program Coordinator with the county, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about the known conditions within Big Valley and some of the historical investigations that we've had to date.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Jackson. I'm a water resources technician, and today I'll be talking about Big Valley Groundwater Basin and SGMA compliance.
Go ahead, Christy.
All right. I'm Christy Clark. I am with Stantec Consulting. We have been working with the Department of Water Resources in Lake County for about the last year, working under a contract from Department of Water Resources for the state, doing outreach and engagement.
Hi everyone, my name is Maritza Flores. I'm with Stantec, and I also work with Christy through the Department of Water Resources through the facilitation support services.
All right, thank you everyone. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to William, who will be starting our presentation off today. Oh, just kidding. I'm gonna go do an overview of what we're gonna be talking about. So again, hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. So our discussion today is gonna be focused on our Big Valley Groundwater Basin in terms of California Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, referred to as SGMA. You're gonna be hearing a lot of acronyms, but do not worry. Our team will be going over the acronyms, and if you have any questions, of course, we will take those at the end. So just please keep that in mind. So again, we'll be covering SGMA, Big Valley, and of course, we will be touching base on our Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which is our GSA, and then our Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which is our GSP, which we are in the process of developing for SGMA, and then going over next steps and of course, questions at the end. So now I will pass it over to William to go ahead and get us started. Thank you, William.
So my name is William Fox, and I'm a Water Resource Program Coordinator with Lake County, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the known conditions and some of the historical investigations that we've had today. So before we begin, I'd like to define a couple key terms, such as groundwater basin. Groundwater basin, such as Big Valley, is defined as an aquifer or aquifers formed through water deposited erosive processes, such as the physical processes in a river channel or on a floodplain, with a well-defined boundary in both the lateral and horizontal direction. An aquifer is an underground layer of water-bearing permeable rock fractures, or unconsolidated materials such as gravel, sand, and silt. So I'd also like to define confined, unconfined, and semi-confined aquifers. A confined aquifer is an aquifer below the land surface with impermeable material both above and below the aquifer. An unconfined aquifer is an aquifer where groundwater is in direct contact with the atmosphere through open pore spaces or of overlying rock or soil. A semi-confined aquifer is an aquifer partially overlain by a rock formation which has low permeability through which water can only pass slowly to recharge the aquifer. The upper groundwater surface in an unconfined aquifer is called the water table. Now, there's been a long-term process of understanding the groundwater in Big Valley, and that process started way back in 1967 with the first investigation into the recharge dynamics of Big Valley by the Soil Mechanics and Foundation Engineers Incorporated. Their aim was to, one, determine the technical feasibility of carrying out supplemental recharge in the Big Valley Basin, to define the groundwater geology and hydrology of Big Valley, and to develop a preliminary plan for groundwater replenishment in Big Valley. This also outlined the need for the Kelsey Creek detention structure. A second report was created in 2003 by Christensen and Associates to provide up-to-date information needed for planning and management. This then led to the Lake County Watershed Protection District Groundwater Management Plan in 2006. These documents, along with a host of others, will be used in the Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which we will be submitting in early January 2022. Now you can see this map clearly defines the outline of Big Valley Basin, which I was saying is important for the definition of a groundwater basin. And you can also see the Big Valley Fault, which divides two distinct areas of recharge. This Big Valley Fault is a late quaternary fault, which means that it has moved in the last 1.6 million years. Now, some of these diagrams you can see, particularly on this one, has Clear Lake and the Kelseyville Formation, but you can almost imagine them like an ant farm with different layers associated with each, like a tunnel that an ant makes. And so you can see the first distinct portion of the Younger Basin deposits in the north, which contain Aquifer 1 and Aquifer 2, or A1 and A2, and then the raised uplands, which comprise the Kelseyville Formation in the southern and western portion, which contain Aquifer 3 and the volcanic ash aquifer. Now, there's four major aquifers in Big Valley, and I'll go back to this first diagram because it's easier to see the first two aquifers. So much of the A1 aquifer underlays the northern portion of Big Valley and contains deposits of gravel, sand, silt. And it ranges from 10 to 126 feet in thickness, and the A1 aquifer is generally unconfined except near and under Clear Lake, where it's confined by an overlying clay layer. And you can clearly see that in this diagram as the C1, or the clay layer, confining the A1 aquifer near Clear Lake. Now the A2 aquifer is directly below the A1 aquifer and the confining C2 or clay layer, which divides the two aquifers. The A2 aquifer ranges from 14 to 140 feet in thickness and is likely comprised of those similar deposits of gravel, sand, and silt. The A2 aquifer is generally confined or semi-confined by this clay C2 layer. Now, the A3 aquifer overlays much of the uplands on the southern portion of Big Valley, and the aquifer ranges from 5 to 160 feet in thickness. The deposits of the A3 aquifer are similar to that of the A1 and A2 of gravel, sand, silt, and clay. The A2 or the A3 aquifer is generally unconfined. As you can see, it's open to the atmosphere here. Now, the volcanic ash aquifer is directly below A3 and another confining clay layer here. You can see C4. Now, the volcanic ash aquifer ranges from around 2 to 5 feet in thickness, although thickness as high as 50 feet has been reported in 2 wells. And this aquifer consists of volcanic tuff, and water throughout the aquifer is confined. Sorry. So the majority of recharge in the groundwater of the A1 aquifer and the A2 aquifer is from the infiltration of surface flow from the Kelsey and Adobe creeks into the aquifer systems. Additional recharge of the A1 and A2 aquifers occurs from percolation of rainfall and underflow from the A3 aquifer. The A3 aquifer is recharged by percolation of rainfall and infiltration from Kelsey Creek. Recharge of the volcanic ash aquifer is poorly understood, although possibly recharged by underflow from the uplands and infiltration of stream flow at surface exposures of that volcanic ash. Now, with this map and this diagram, you can clearly see that there's a lot of variability throughout the Big Valley Basin. This picture was prepared by Christensen and Associates in their 2003 Big Valley groundwater investigation. And they used well logs to determine the stratigraphy of the area. And you can further see how that variability is very dramatic with this fence diagram. And you can see how the A1 aquifer as well as the A3 aquifer has dramatic differences depending on where you actually are in the Big Valley Basin. And so with that being said, there's still so much unknown about Big Valley Groundwater Basin. And to that end, we're excited to bring on a consultant to better understand, plan, and manage for this invaluable natural resource. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, William. So now I'll go ahead and provide a high-level overview on what is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So if we go on to the next slide, we can see that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, otherwise known as SGMA, was signed in 2014 by Governor Brown. And essentially what it is, it's a 3-bill legislation focused on groundwater sustainability. But most importantly, it recognizes that groundwater management is best done at a local level. If we move on to the following slide, we can see that in California, there are 515 groundwater basins, and all of those 515 groundwater basins went through a process of being prioritized. And through that prioritization process, the basins were put into 4 categories based on the criteria, ranging from very low, low, medium, and high. And as a result of that basin prioritization process, Big Valley Basin was identified as medium priority. And because it is medium priority, it must therefore comply with any and everything described under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. If we move on to the next slide. Here I will cover a couple of acronyms that will be thrown throughout this presentation. The first one being SGMA, otherwise known as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And essentially, as I said before, it's representative of the 3-bill legislative package that provides a framework for sustainable groundwater management. Then we have GSA, and that stands for the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which essentially is the local establishment of an entity that will essentially oversee the management of any sustainable groundwater management activities. And lastly, we have GSP, which stands for the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which ultimately refers to the local roadmap and documentation that will essentially help guide the basin towards reaching groundwater sustainability by either 2040 or 2042, specifically 2042 for Big Valley Basin. If we move on to the next slide. Here on the screen, we can see a timeline. And so ultimately, SGMA provides a timeline for working towards groundwater sustainability. As I said, groundwater sustainability should ultimately be accomplished by the year 2042 in Big Valley Basin. As you can see, there are several requirements for meeting SGMA compliance. The ones in orange are the ones that are specifically applicable to Big Valley. Big Valley Basin has already established their GSA and is working towards developing their GSP. But we should remember that the Groundwater Sustainability Plan will be done at a local scale for guidance. Big Valley Basin GSA or Big Valley GSA will submit their plan in January 2022 and then update every 5 years. The aim is to achieve groundwater sustainability plan goals within 20 years or by the year 2042. If we move on to the next slide. Here we can see a slide that essentially breaks up the roles and responsibilities of the main entities involved. And so on here, we have the local agency, which is the Big Valley GSA. We then have the California Department of Water Resources, or DWR, which provides guidance and assistance throughout the process and are the ones who will review the submittal process. And lastly, we have the California State Water Resources Control Board. And only if the local efforts fail will they step in to help the basin achieve sustainability. If we move on to the next slide. So these points I've already covered, but essentially GSP development and it's essentially Big Valley Basin's a medium priority basin, and GSP will ultimately be the roadmap for meeting groundwater sustainability in the long term up to the year 2042 and onward. And there's only one GSA within this region. It's not like the Central Valley where there's multiple GSPs or multiple GSAs working towards a common effort. And so to help everyone understand what goes into a GSP, I'd like to go over the GSP, what GSP includes. And so we can go on to the next slide. And so within this groundwater sustainability plan process, development, implementation, here we can see this figure of the different items that need to go into it. And if we go on to the next slide, here we can see the major takeaways of this effort. The major takeaways is that this is a local effort that will not involve state involvement. It will be a local effort within Big Valley Basin. The plan will be developed locally and provided as a roadmap. And we all have the same goal to keep groundwater management local and to achieve groundwater sustainability within the next 20 years. At this point, I'll go ahead and hand over the presentation to Matt that will provide additional perspectives on how Big Valley Basin will work towards SGMA compliance. Thanks.
Thanks, Maritza. I just want to thank you all for attending. My name is Matthew Jackson, and I'll just kind of be building upon what Stantec's presentation was by providing an overview on why Big Valley Basin must comply with SGMA. So back in June of 2016, DWR adopted regulations for evaluating groundwater sustainability plans. Step one was to form a local groundwater sustainability agency, and in August of 2019, Big Valley GSA was formed. Now steps 2 and 3 is kind of where we're headed. So step 2, Big Valley GSA is to adopt a groundwater sustainability plan and be managed by that plan by January 31st, 2022. And step 3, Big Valley GSA is to achieve their groundwater sustainability goal 20 years after the adoption of the GSP, and that puts us at January 31st, 2042. So essentially the GSP lays out the path that the basin will take to achieve sustainable groundwater management within those 20 years. Next slide, please. And so a basin's prioritization is based on several components, which include population and rate of growth, public supply wells, total wells, irrigated acreage, groundwater reliance, impacts, and habitat and other information. And so these factors are then totaled up, and then the basins that are ranked high, medium, low, or very low priority. Those basins that are ranked high or medium priority are subject to SGMA, meaning they must form GSAs and develop GSPs. And as we can see here on the left, Big Valley received a total of 20 points, which designated the basin as medium priority. And this information is available to the public, and you can visit the prioritization dashboard by using the link provided if you kind of want to dig more into detail on all the points received within the different components. But it's important to note that the designation of medium priority does not mean that the basin is not being managed well or that it's impaired. It simply means that the groundwater basin scored high on factors that indicate that the basin is an important and critical source for the overlying cities and farms. In fact, many medium and high priority groundwater basins are well managed. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we're doing include monthly groundwater measurements for about 10 wells that we think provide a good representation of the groundwater within the basin. And these measurements strictly include depth to groundwater, which gives groundwater elevations that are used to determine long-term averages. We're also doing semi-annual groundwater reading, both in the spring and fall, for about 40 wells within the basin. And of those 40 wells, 9 are reported to CASGIM. And so CASGIM is short for California statewide groundwater elevation monitoring, which is a tool that tracks seasonal and long-term groundwater elevation trends in groundwater basins statewide. And then CASGIM data is available to the public and can be accessed by visiting the link provided on this slide. And then additional technical work will be completed by our awarded consultant. And next slide, please. And so SGMA defines sustainable groundwater management as the management and use of groundwater that can be maintained without causing undesirable results. And now undesirable results as defined by SGMA include persistent lowering of groundwater levels, significant and unreasonable reductions in groundwater storage, significant and unreasonable saltwater intrusion, which we won't have to worry about in this basin, significant and unreasonable degradation of water quality, significant and unreasonable land subsidence, and surface water depletion having significant and unreasonable effects on beneficial uses. Now, what's considered significant and unreasonable is left for local GSAs and stakeholders to decide. Next slide, please. So Sigma establishes a broad framework for local agencies to manage groundwater, giving local agencies some flexibility about how to achieve sustainability, as well as how sustainability is defined in the local context. Although the state's supporting us with funding, it's important to maintain local control of the groundwater. And so Sigma has defined roles for all the agencies involved. And here we can see in the blue that GSAs, they are tasked with developing a GSP to manage the groundwater within the basin. And in order to effectively implement those plans, Sigma provides new tools and authorities, including requiring registration of groundwater wells, measuring and limiting groundwater extractions, imposing fees for groundwater management, and enforcing the terms of a groundwater sustainability plan. And then Sigma has also tasked the Department of Water Resources, seen in the yellow circle, with developing regulations to revise groundwater basin boundaries, adopting regulations for evaluating and implementing GSPs, identifying basins subject to critical conditions or overdraft, identifying water available for groundwater replenishment, and publishing best management practices for sustainable management of groundwater. DWR is also tasked with evaluating GSPs for adequacy. Now, for enforcement purposes, seen in the red circle, the legislation allows for the intervention by the State Water Board in instances where the GSA does not complete a plan by the mandated deadline of 2022, or if the plan is deemed inadequate by DWR and remains so after efforts to cure those deficiencies, or the plan being implemented simply does not work. And it's important to note that if the State Water Board must intervene in the management of a groundwater basin, the board must assess fees to recover the costs incurred in administering a probationary basin. And next slide, please. So how can you participate? First, you can determine what groundwater basin you reside in by visiting the link provided in the first bullet point. You just simply input your address and it'll tell you what basin you reside in. And next, if you haven't already done so, please visit our website and fill out our interested parties form to receive automated notifications of meetings and opportunities to engage in the process. And it's also important to attend these meetings and workshops and provide any comments or input. And again, thank you all for being here today. And now I will hand it back over to Marina.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Hello, everyone. And I would like to touch base just a little bit regarding our Sigma implementation in our Big Valley Basin. So as Maritza mentioned to us, Sigma was signed into law in September of 2014 by Governor Edmund G. Brown and became effective in 2015. So Sigma is comprised of 3 different bill packages, AB 1739, SB 1168, and SB 1319. And what these bill packages basically do is they provide local agencies such as ourselves the framework for managing a groundwater basin in a sustainable manner. So the legislative does acknowledge that groundwater is best managed locally, and so it requires local agencies called Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, or an acronym, GSA, to develop and implement the plans to achieve groundwater sustainability in their basin, referred to as GSPs. So to support the local management, the legislative identifies role for various state agencies to support groundwater management in the different basins that Maritza mentioned. So if we can see on this chart right over here, we see that DWR serves as the regulatory and assisting agency, and that is the California Department of Water Resources. We also have the State Water Resources Control Board. They serve as the assistance, oversight, and enforcing agency. And the GSA, which will be us at the local level, serve as the planning and implementation agency. So another thing about this chart that I would like to point out is we can see that the stakeholders have communications and input and guidance throughout the entire process. So they are wrapped around all the different entities and overlap and have communications during the entire process. Next slide, please. So on August 27th of 2019, the Lake County Board of Supervisors, acting as the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District, held a public hearing and adopted the resolution approving the formation of the Big Valley GSA, where the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District sit as the Big Valley GSA and coordinate with the board-elected Big Valley GSA Advisory Committee. So over here on the slide, we can see our Big Valley GSA, and they are made up of Supervisor Bruno Sabatier, Supervisor E.J. Crandall, Supervisor Tina Scott, Supervisor Moak Simon, and Supervisor Jessica Paiska. So the Big Valley GSA is committed to working with regional and local partners to sustainably manage the groundwater resources within the Big Valley Groundwater Basin. And again, one way that they will be doing this is working closely with a board-elected GSA advisory committee, which is made up of stakeholders. Next slide, please. And this goes along closely with the hard work that Stantec has been helping us with. So Stantec has been having stakeholder assessments with some of our stakeholders in the Big Valley Basin. So the district was awarded facilitation support services through DWR, and with assistance from Stantec, which we have our team, our Stantec team on the call with us today. They are able to help us provide these stakeholder assessments and develop a stakeholder engagement and communication outreach plan that we will be putting in our groundwater sustainability plan. So a few of the stakeholders that we've had conversations with and will be key players in our GSP development include representatives from the Lake County Farm Bureau, Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, the Chi Council for the Clear Lake Hitch, Lake County Special Districts, Kelseyville Unified School District, and private well owners. So not only will these stakeholder assessments that Stantec has been helping us with give us the best idea on who we need to have on the advisory committee, but most importantly, they will help us leverage the knowledge and ensure active and effective stakeholder engagement and knowledge of the basin. So our stakeholders are in the basin, they live in the basin, they know the basin the best. So being able to have these conversations with them and bring them to the table when we are doing our Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan development is essential. Next slide, please. All right, so although the state and the legislative does acknowledge that our groundwater basin is best managed at the local level, I would like to highlight that the state has been a huge resource and most important, access of support for us during this entire process of our GSP development and GSA development as well. So in 2019, we applied for the Proposition 68 DWR Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant, and we were awarded a little under $1.4 million with a $0 cost share to develop our GSP. So these funds will be used for the development of our groundwater sustainability plan. And with these funds, we are planning on bringing a consultant on board. So our tentative plan is to award that consultant next week on the 16th to help us get that development going for our groundwater sustainability plan. So another good resource that we were able to lean on is all the outlines and requirements and documents that the state has been able to provide us in terms of our groundwater sustainability plan development. One of these resources we can see here is the resource guide for our DWR provided climate change data and guidance to use during our groundwater sustainability planning efforts. So resources such as this outlines not only the steps, but the requirements for our GSP development. So when we bring on our consultant on board, we are looking for a consultant to help us develop a GSP for our Big Valley Groundwater Basin, which is again our medium priority basin. And the goals of this project are to build upon previous efforts and conduct all tasks necessary to complete and submit a GSP while leveraging public engagement and collecting the best available data and information of the groundwater basin to develop, adopt, and implement a Big Valley GSP by the January 31st, 2022 deadline. And the key objectives of this project, which is our GSP development, are to develop a GSP for the entire Big Valley Groundwater Basin that one meets the requirements and deadlines outlined in SGMA and DWR's final GSP Emergency Regulations Guide. And the Emergency Regulations Guide is just another resources that the state does provide to ensure that we're meeting all the criteria and necessary information to build the best groundwater sustainability plan that we can for our Big Valley Basin. Incorporates the need and knowledge from local stakeholders, the Big Valley GSA and the Big Valley GSA Advisory Committee, uses best available technical and scientific information from the history of data collection and studies previously conducted within the basin, which, as Matthew mentioned, we do monthly and quarterly or twice a year well monitoring. So we do have data spanning back from the 60s for a lot of our wells, which is going to be essential when we do our groundwater sustainability plan development. And of course, leverage limited available funding and resources for the development and implementation of the GSP. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. All right. Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. So next step. So again, we're planning to award our consultant on March of 16th, 2021 to help us get going on that Big Valley GSP development. From now until our deadline of January 31st, 2022, and even looking past that as well, we'll continue to hold our monthly Big Valley GSA Advisory Committee meetings and our public meetings to ensure that we're having this effective and active communication with our stakeholders and our GSA. Again, from now on until the deadline of January 31st, 2022, we will be developing our GSP, again, to once again meet that deadline of January 31st, and then looking at the long term, just also planning on finding different ways of funding. So everything that we outline in our GSP, again, our goal is to achieve sustainability by 2042. So looking at other grants and funding opportunities to ensure that what we outline in our GSP, we are actually able to implement. So we're in the planning stages now. After the planning stages will become the implementation. So looking long-term, seeing what we need to get going so we can ensure that we meet that sustainability. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so at this point, I would like to open it up for any questions that you guys may have of us or the team at hand. If not, if you have any questions in the long run, I have our contact information here. You're more than welcome to call us, email us, any point in time if you have any questions regarding Big Valley and our SGMA implementation. I've also included the links here for the State Water Resources Control Board and the California Department of Water Resources if you would like to get a little bit more information on the resources that the state has provided. And of course, the link to our very own Big Valley Groundwater and GSA website that we have that we'll be updating on a weekly basis. And I would like to note that this presentation and yesterday's presentation, along with the presentation that we gave to the board on this past Tuesday, will be uploaded on our website. So if you ever just want to reminisce on the good times that we had today and this past week in honor of Groundwater Awareness Week, because Groundwater Awareness Week is every week, you're more than welcome to check that out. So on that note, I would like to open it up for any questions. Yes, I see a hand raised. Supervisor Sabatier.
Started on the loop, and as soon as we got that, it's like halfway, the horse is all new. We were halfway on our way.
Hello,
Yes, go ahead.
I hear someone else. I really like the portion that William was showing with all the different layers, and I'm kind of curious, do we know what the approximate depth of all the layers above the ash layer is?
So I have the depths of the aquifers. I could try and figure out the depths of the clay layers. They're probably in that 2003 Christensen and Associates Big Valley Groundwater investigation. I can read the depths back off to you, but yeah, we do have the depths of all the aquifers. Again, they're very variable depending on where you are throughout Big Valley Groundwater Basin, but we do have approximate depths for all those aquifers.
Yeah, if it's possible to share that with me, not right now, obviously, that's probably a whole lot of data, but if you could just email it to me, that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the history of how long it's taken to fill up as much as it has, because we know when the last time that the volcano left that ash layer is, and so it'd just be kind of interesting to find out, especially just to remember what the lay of the land looked like and possibly the real depth and how spread out the lake was. I have another question. All this data that the decision on whether it's low, medium, or high risk and why it needs to be in a sustainability plan, do we have the year-to-year data on the amount of wells that are being used, the amount of irrigated acreage that's being used? And I think the last one that seemed interesting was like the reliance on groundwater. Is there kind of a chart to show us if that's increasing, decreasing, staying flat, just to kind of see what is the slope of change at this moment in time on that graph? Because the more I think, I listened to your guys' presentation yesterday, and I wanted to listen again because I was kind of multitasking yesterday. And when I first saw that we're supposed to be done with our sustainability plan in 2042, I was like, wow, that's going to take a really long time to figure out how to be sustainable. But then the more I look at the data that's being utilized, I'm also curious, how easy is it to come up with a sustainability plan with so much change? And especially with climate change happening at the same time, I don't mean to say it doesn't sound realistic to say it's going to happen. So 2042 maybe is why it's going to take so long. But having that data to see how the effects of what we're doing right now would be really interesting to see all of that put together. So appreciate the presentations. I'm always learning more about my area. I don't have too much agriculture right here in my backyard. I don't reside right next to Big Valley. So interesting information to have. So thank you very much. And I'd love to see that data if it exists.
Definitely, and we can get that to you, Supervisor Sabatier. So thank you for your comments. And we will also send you that report. It's on our website as well, the Lake County Water Resources website, so everyone will have access to that. But yes, as you mentioned, there is a lot of data there, so we can get you those measurements.
And I'm sorry, I had one more question.
Of course, go ahead.
At the beginning, I believe it was, sorry if I say your name wrong, Maritza, I think you were the one doing the presentation. In your presentation, there was the critical and non-critical sustainability plan, depending on which GSA we were looking at. What sets it into critical? Because we're non-critical, but I'm sure there's a sliding scale of how close you can be to becoming critical. And is it possible for us to become critical?
I think all of that would have to go back to how the different metrics used to classify the basins between low, medium, high, and critical. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can definitely look into that and definitely follow up with you on that if that works.
It just puts the importance of if we're close to being in the critical bucket, then what exactly would be the consequences of having that change? So that's my curiosity on that one. Thank you again. But yes, I'd love to, any information you can share.
All right, thank you. And I would like to point to the chat. We have a few questions there. So Sarah Ryan asked if we could please send out tonight's presentation, and absolutely we will send those out via email. So that is another good point. Thank you, Sarah. We do have a listserv that you can sign up for on our groundwater sustainability page that we have for Lake County. So I will be sure to send out not only tonight's presentation, but last night or yesterday's presentation, and then the presentation to the board as well. So you will have those, and again, they will be available on the website. And then Dale and Ann asked who are the members of the advisory committee. And the members of the advisory committee, that will be a board elected advisory committee, but they will be made up of Big Valley Basin stakeholders. So Sigma clearly outlines who needs to be on the advisory committee and who needs to have a seat at the table in terms of our GSP development. And those are all the uses and users of the groundwater basin. So as we can see, we have some friends from the Lake County Farm Bureau and other farmers and ag area in the basin. We have Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians. We have private well owners, Chi Council for the Clear Lake Hitch, Lake County Special Districts, and then folks from the Kelseyville Unified School District. So these are folks who have participated in our stakeholder assessments. And thank you, Matthew, for including the link to our listserv in the chat there. Do we have any other questions? And then Ann and Dale, did I answer your question okay?
Marina, this is Dale Carnathan, and no, I'm interested because we've got some large users there, but quite a few folks in the basin are not large users and will be affected by this. The other interesting point that I'd like to make is that as part of the sustainability plan, are there any plans to require participation by some of the larger drafters on the basin itself?
So yes, that's one reason why we're going to be having our public meetings. So we will be having our GSA advisory committee meetings. And once we have a better framework of how those meetings are going to take place, these meetings are all public meetings as well. So everyone will have the opportunity to participate in those meetings. Of course, priority for those folks in the Big Valley Basin. We have a pretty quick timeline to approach and to meet our GSP development submittal deadline. But yes, that's the whole point of having these public meetings, to ensure that everyone's voices are heard. The folks in the basin have a seat at the table to participate. And then Erin Smith with DWR, she did mention in the chat, and I will just read those for those, I will read this so for those that cannot see this. So Erin mentioned that critically overdraft basins were designated by Bulletin 118, and most are in the San Joaquin Valley and Southern California. They have long-term groundwater level declines upwards of tens of feet, in some cases even more. And then she provided the link for the critically overdraft basins as well. So thank you, Erin, for providing that. All right, do we have any questions? Any other questions? And of course, if we could go to the last slide, William, please, we'll put our contact information back up there. So if you don't have any questions right now and you think of something at a later date, because you're just, again, so elated that it's Groundwater Awareness Week, you're more than welcome. I'm going to keep saying this as long as I can. The week's almost over. You're more than welcome to reach out to us, and we would be more than happy to answer those. And we will keep everyone updated. Again, look out for more emails and updates on our end. For our next public meetings, we are excited to keep the conversation and energy going so we can meet our January 31st, 2022 deadline. If that's it, I will stay on the call until 7 p.m. So if you have any other questions, I will be here to answer those. If not, thank you everyone for your participation today. This was fun and exciting, and I hope you all got a lot out of it. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your night. Thank you, everyone.